everyone, I'm Corrie,
And I'm Charlotte.
and together we are Literary Ramblings, and this is the podcast where we talk about books. Each of us takes a turn each month to choose a book to read, and then we get together and we talk about it. Um, we give our star ratings out of 5 and all of that. So this month we read Scythe by Neal Shusterman. It's a YA book, and it was my pick for this month. So I will be reading the back of the book for you guys because we decided to just kind of stop doing the whole trying to write it ourselves because that's a lot of work and we're both busy. We're both busy.
Yeah, I mean, someone already got paid to write the summary that's on the back of the book, so we should just...
Yeah, for real, we really should because they get paid more than I do for doing this since neither of us getting paid at all.
Yep.
And they're like professionals at it too, so good times. I remember that I picked this book because we had it for really cheap at the bookstore that I worked at. I bought this book probably like over a year ago and just now got around to reading it.
And this is the only book that we've done this year that I've like carried around and someone's been like, "Oh, I read that."
Yeah. No, for sure. It's probably the most popular book that we've ever actually read.
Yep.
I mean, I don't feel like the books that we've read before have been... I mean, some of them have been basically like just complete unknowns. But Michael Chabon, the author of Gentlemen of the Road, is actually fairly known. He's got quite a few books, and they all have pretty decent reviews. But this one is YA, and it's like super popular. I actually bought it because we had it for really cheap, and we were doing a void, which is when we scan books and send them back to our warehouse for whatever reason. I don't know why or how they pick which books to go back, but we do it a few times a year. And the really cheap copies were going to go back. And so before they left our system, I just bought them. I just bought 2 copies because I was like, I kind of was interested in reading it, and they were really cheap. So I was like, okay, I'll just get them before they go. And then we haven't had bargain copies of them since. So I was right because the very next week after that, they went on bestsellers.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I lucked out. And
way to scoop it up.
Yeah, I probably would not have bought this book, honestly, if it hadn't been dirt cheap. And not like anything negative about it. Like the cover is really nice, and I think I've always been drawn to it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those books that I was drawn to, but I was never like, I have to read this.
Did you notice that there's actually a face under the hood on the cover?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on all the covers. This is the first book in a trilogy. It's the Arc of the Scythe trilogy, and this is book 1. The cover is really nice. It's a very cool cover. All 3 of the books actually have really cool covers. They're all out right now. They're all out in paperback too, so it's been a little while. But they have remained fairly popular. I remember them coming out, like the next couple books coming out, and them being pretty popular. And I've sold a few, I know, in the last couple weeks of the first one. People really like this series. So
yeah, and the person who commented on it said that they bought it because they liked the cover. So
yeah, good cover design is very important. People are like, don't judge a book by its cover, and I'm like, people pay thousands of dollars to design their book covers, so they want you to do that. If a book has a bad cover, it can ruin the sales of the book. It doesn't matter how good the book is. It will.
If it doesn't catch your eye, I mean, why are you going to pick it up in the first place?
Yeah. There's a lot of really pretty covers in the young adult section in general. Young adult and sci-fi both have really good cover designs, just in general. And I think that's
meanwhile,
a lot.
The nonfiction books that we've read have had not great covers at all.
Yeah.
I guess they're just sold on content.
Yeah, they really are. But yeah, so this is the first book. That's why I picked it, because I was vaguely interested in it, and then it was dirt cheap, so I got it. And yeah, it's not one of those that I was ever like really determined to read, but I know there are a lot of people who are very determined to read this book. So good for them, I guess. Okay, I'm going to read the back of the book so we can start talking about it.
All right.
Okay. Thou shalt kill. A world with no hunger, no disease, no war, no misery. Humanity has conquered all those things, and has even conquered death. Now, scythes are the only ones who can end life, and they are commanded to do so in order to keep the size of the population under control. Citra and Rowan are chosen to apprentice to a scythe, a role that neither wants. These teens must master the art of taking life, knowing that the consequence of failure could mean losing their own. They learn living in a perfect world comes only with a heavy price. So yeah, that's the back of the book. So it is about two teens. We all my words escape me. We go back and forth between their perspectives. There's an actual word for that I don't know at this time. Alternate.
Alternate, yeah.
Yeah, we alternate between their perspectives. There are some really weird perspective shifts in here where you suddenly shift into the perspective of a complete stranger.
Yeah.
And I have mixed feelings about that. I kind of liked it, but I also sort of hated it sometimes.
Yeah, because I feel like he establishes pretty early that, like, these are your two main characters, and then jumping into someone else's head felt a little jarring.
Well, especially since oftentimes you would jump into somebody else's head just so then they could be brutally murdered.
Yes, yeah, there's that aspect of it, too.
So, like, that was fine, but also I was like, every time we switched into somebody else's perspective, I was like, oh, they're dead. They're a goner. And they usually are. So, I don't think that's really a spoiler. There'll probably be spoilers in this review.
Probably.
But we usually try to not do too many major spoilers. Although with this one, I think we'll probably have to make an exception because there's a couple things that are going to be big spoilers that I think are unavoidable for us to talk about.
Yeah.
With this book, which we didn't discuss beforehand, but I think you already know a couple of things I'm talking about. So.
Yep.
So yeah. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. And that is my base star rating for a book. I start reading a book and it starts at 3 stars. And if it exceeds expectations, it goes up, and if it disappoints me, it goes down. So this book neither exceeded my expectations nor greatly disappointed me either. So it's 3 stars for me.
You've given a lot of 3 stars, I feel like, in our so
honestly. So I'm doing the reading challenge on Goodreads. Which shout out to my Goodreads, follow me there. I am Cornelia Grace on there. And they tell you at the end of the year, I know because I've seen other people's, this is the first year that I've done the reading challenge, because I don't usually typically keep track of the books that I read on Goodreads, but I am doing it this year, and they tell you at the end of the year what your average star rating is for all the books that you've read.
Yeah.
And I cannot wait to see mine. I'm excited. Come January 1st, that's the first thing I'm going to look at. I'm going to be like, what's my average star rating? Because I anticipate that it's going to be like 2.5 to 3 stars.
Oh no! Even lower than 3?
Yeah, because I've rated several books 1 or 2 stars.
Ooh. See?
I think I only rated one book so far 5 stars, and I think I only rated it that because it was a nonfiction book, and I just really liked the lady who wrote it more than anything else. So I'm not immune to bias. I typically start at 3 stars, and I feel like that's going to be my average rating because that is what I start at.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't do Goodreads, but I have a LiBib account, which you cannot follow me on because it's entirely private and I don't do any of their social media aspects of that site. But I do like the site because it allows you to keep a very comprehensive list of what you've been reading. And it also gives you a ratings average over the past few years. And mine has always skewed towards like the high 3.5 somethings. You know, like 3.9 is probably like the best year that I've had. So,
Oh, okay.
but I tend to I I'm very generous with my ratings, I think. So, and also my book club that I'm in and the other book club that I'm in, yeah, me and Corey are both in multiple book clubs. Um, they pick very neutral books, I would say overall. Like none of them are bad because a lot of them are bestsellers or like really popular books for a reason. But so I feel like that kind of pulls my rating up this year as well.
Yeah, and I tend to I try to be nice about my ratings, and sometimes I will give an additional star on something just because, like, if I feel that I'm being overly biased.
Mm.
Like, for my other book club, we read The Silent Patient, and I wanted to give it 1 star, even though it's a really popular book, but I gave it 2 because I felt like the writing was pretty good, but I really hated everything else about that book. So I do try to like be kind in my ratings, but which is I think why I started at 3 stars. Because if I started at 0 stars, I don't know that I would rate many books very high. But 3 stars is just like 3 out of 5 is better than just like halfway. But it's not, so it doesn't, like, if I rate something that doesn't have a lot of ratings on it already, I don't feel like I'm skewing it so much that it's going to like ruin other people's perception of the book.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not giving it too much either, that I feel like I'm overdoing it.
Exactly, because often when I leave reviews not related to books, I'm leaving them because I feel like they've been under or overestimated by other people, and I want to have an impact on its current star rating.
Yeah, that's fair. I do that too.
So I actually agreed with you on my star rating for this. I also gave it a 3.
Perfect.
Yeah, I didn't. It was fun to read, but I just never felt very invested in the world.
Yeah, I think that we discussed the book a little bit outside of the podcast, but we try to save most of our comments for the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how it feels like the writing style itself is a little clinical in it, which I think is partly the subject matter because, I mean, you follow Citra and Rowan who are learning how to murder people.
Yep.
They don't call it murdering, they call it gleaning.
Yep.
Because they're scythes. And so, I mean, if you were this could be a pretty graphic book if it was a little more descriptive.
Yeah.
But it's still like matter of fact, and I guess it kind of fits because the world is sort of utopian. There is an AI that people made, and instead of becoming evil and taking over the world, this AI was just like, oh, well, we can just manage the world really well now because I have the whole of human knowledge within me. So the Thunderhead, which is what it's called because it was the cloud, and now they call it the Thunderhead because it has all of human knowledge in it. It manages everything. It manages self-driving cars. It manages like food production. It manages waste. It manages everything. So it knows exactly how to do things as efficiently as possible. So that's why it's utopian in that there's no disease, there's no war, there's no hunger, there's nothing. There's still like some inequality, but it's more. Yeah, but they painted that it's more by choice, but I feel like it's less that and more that the Thunderhead, to some extent, has to understand that people need to feel like they're working to something, because otherwise you just stagnate.
Yeah, stagnate is a word that comes up a lot in this book.
Yeah, and I think that it is appropriate that it does, but I think that also is something that contributes to how clinical the book feels, because this world is so unrelatable to everything that I know. Because they don't even have necessarily, they have nanites in their bloodstream all the time. And so if they ever like get a paper cut or something, the nanites immediately heal it, and they release like morphine or like painkillers into your blood like automatically. So you're never really like injured. If you get like hit by a bus, they just take you to a revival center and they can pretty much fix any injury. So you're
Yep.
never dead. You're only dead-ish.
Yeah, which is a kind of funny term. I liked that they used that.
Yeah, I liked it too.
Although,
Unless you're killed by a scythe, in which case
or
the Thunderhood does not revive you.
or you're killed by fire, which is the
Yes.
other loophole.
Yeah. So those are the two, I guess, loopholes. The scythes are self-governed. They're not under the Thunderhead's rule because they decided when the Thunderhead took over that killing people and deciding who should die should be left to people, which I think is really stupid.
Yeah, you think it'd be fair if it was just like a lottery or something?
No, I hate that story.
Oh, okay. Yeah, me too.
There's a short story called The Lottery. It's a classic. If you Google it, you can find it. It's like a page long, and I despise it with every fiber of my being.
Yep, I wish I never would have read it.
Yeah, I hate it. Anyway, no, I think that, well, it's interesting. There's like a lot of questions involved in that. In how scythes decide who to kill. Because the first scythe that we meet, I guess it's technically Scythe Corrie, but it's Scythe Faraday.
Yeah.
We meet him, and he takes Rowan and Citra, and he chooses them to be apprentices. Which if you are going to be apprenticed to a scythe comes and chooses whoever they want to have as their apprentice, and they choose you in your childhood. And they've conquered death in a way in this world because you're able to genetically reverse aging.
Yep.
So they call it turning a corner, where once you get up to a certain age, you can go and get the genetic stuff, the genetic therapy, I think is what they call it. And then you're like reversed age to like 25. And but so people count their age up until they're like an adult, and then they kind of like stop after a while. But if you're going to be a scythe's apprentice, you're always chosen in childhood.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. Because it means that you can't.
Sense.
Yeah, it means that you're not really going to go out and have like a normal life before you're a scythe.
Yeah, well, because otherwise, like, you might have a family of your own or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if you're a teenager, it's kind of like you haven't had time to go do that yet.
Yeah. Yeah. But we meet Scythe Faraday, and Scythe Faraday chooses who to kill based on pre-immortality statistics.
Yeah.
So he picks a lady in a parking lot because he's like, well, this percentage of people died in parking lot accidents, so we will glean her. And he picks one teenager because the teen the Thunderhead knows everything about everybody too. Like literally everything. So the Scythes have access to all the information in the Thunderhead, but they don't have access to like the AI part of it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. They have the data, but not the AI part of it. So the AI doesn't help them at all. They have no contact with the actual intelligence of the Thunderhead.
Yeah. So I assume he just pulls up like a spreadsheet and looks at like, okay, this is how people died in this year or something.
Yeah, stuff like that. So he chooses a high schooler who does a lot of at-risk behavior like drinking and driving, which I don't know how he determines that since all the cars are self-driving.
Yeah.
I suppose because he'd always be riding. He would never be driving. I guess if he has a habit of sitting in the driver's seat.
Well, but there are actually, I mean, because Corrie has a non-self-driving car, so maybe it's possible he does that.
Maybe. But he does that because 0.303% of the teen population dies that way, pre-immortality. So that's why Faraday chooses that. That's actually how he finds Rowan. Not that he comes to glean Rowan, but Rowan is there when Faraday gleans the other high schooler. And so that's how Faraday chooses. But then other scythes choose different ways, and we actually didn't get to see that many scythes. Like, we see Scythe Corries eventually,
Mm-hmm.
And she just kind of like walks around until she sees people who look like they've given up on life, and then she
Yep.
gleans. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Which
oh,
is kind of impossible because of the nanites that kind of monitor like depression and stuff. It's kind of impossible for
yeah,
people to like get actually suicidal or anything.
yeah,
So she just kind of looks at their eyes, I guess, and is like, ah, that person looks done.
yeah, and it's weird. I think hers is the weirdest,
Yeah.
um, at least that we know of. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's one more side, and he just likes to do mass gleanings, where
Goddard.
where he just goes and he just like murders 200 people. He has other sides with him.
Yeah.
There's like a quota that you have to kill so many people a year, and they have to not fit into like one demographic too much, so you
Mm.
can't like show bias.
Yeah. Although if they truly wanted to be unbiased, they would need the computer algorithm, really.
Yeah, they really would. But they just have like all these little quotas and stuff, but that's all we know about how sides choose who to glean.
Mm-hmm.
Um but yeah.
And they all take names from famous people. That's why these names are sounding familiar, like Curie.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
literally named after that Curie who
Yeah.
discovered radiation.
Yeah. And then there's a Mandela, and there's a couple others that I recognized.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing that reason Corey said we kind of met Curie first is that her journal entries kind of are scattered throughout the book on like chapter ends. There's a couple other journal entries as well, but a Scythe is required to write a journal every day.
Yes.
And technically anyone could go on and read them because they're just stored in the Thunderhead with everything else, but
Yeah.
people don't.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting, and it never really came up in the book again that like people are so uninterested in the information that is in the Thunderhead. Like there never even seemed to be any characters that were like really invested into learning what the Thunderhead has stored in it, you know?
Yeah. They never like because there's nothing left to work for. They mention it a few times throughout the book that there's nothing left to like figure out. They've literally like conquered death. There
Mm.
is nothing else to find out. And yet nobody like accesses the information or anything because there's no point.
Mhm.
They know it's there,
Yeah.
but they don't use it, which I mean is quite realistic.
You think so?
Um, yeah, because people do that now.
I guess, but I feel like there's still people out there who are obsessed with knowledge and they
Yeah,
haven't technically learned everything. They've barely gone outside the solar system in this universe.
well, yeah, but I mean, people don't really care to know and remember as much anymore. Like, yeah, there's still people
Yeah.
interested in history. I'm not saying we are there, but I think that it's accurate to say that if we had access to all of human knowledge, we still wouldn't utilize it all the time. Because,
Mm.
I mean, when's the last time you memorized a phone number?
Yeah, like years ago.
Yeah, and then like I've Googled the same thing so many times because it'll come up and I'll be like, oh, that stupid fact. I know I've looked this up before. And then I'll look it up again and I'll be like, oh, it's this. And then I'll just instantly forget it because I don't have to remember it because Google remembers it for me.
That's true. That is actually a real phenomenon. It's kind of like
Yeah.
I can't ever remember how many minutes to boil an egg for to hard boil it. And I just constantly Google like how to boil an egg, and it's like hypothetically I know, but
Yeah.
I just double
You
check.
just, it, yeah, you just instantly forget
Mhm.
because you know that that information is easily accessible and you'll
Yeah.
have it later.
Yeah. Like I
It's
don't need to remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very interesting phenomenon. And that's what this really reminded me of the world in
And
this book
I
and
guess
how
you're
people don't go looking for the information. And I'm like, well, that feels realistic in that aspect of it.
and you're right in that because the AI has been proven to be trustworthy. I feel like that would happen even more because right now it's like there is false information out there on the internet.
Yeah.
So we don't quite live in that type of society. But if the Thunderhead has been working for hundreds of years, which it has, like, I guess there's no reason not to trust it to just remember all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Thunderhead is pretty benevolent. It's not it's It's interesting because this book, like, I can tell that in the next books you'd get a lot more information about the Thunderhead, like,
Mhm.
itself, because it definitely is going to have its own personality.
Yeah.
But you kind of see glimpses of that and how, like, because Citra, when she's a child, she pushes a girl in front of a bus,
Mhm.
which, like, doesn't actually matter because, like, the girl just loses a couple of days at
Mhm.
school because she goes to a revival center and she's fine. It's not like Citra was literally murdering this girl, but we're told that the Thunderhead would have known that she did that because
Mhm.
the Thunderhead is in every single camera and every single microphone everywhere all the time. Like it sees everything. But it didn't intervene. And nobody ever found out that it was her, that it was
Nope.
Citra who pushed the girl in front of the bus until Citra confessed to it. And so the Thunderhead sees everything, but sometimes it decides not to interfere with things.
Yep. It
And
just kind of
so
lets things play out.
yeah, so it clearly has like some kind of personality, but it also seems somewhat benevolent, even though it didn't tell anybody that Citra pushed that girl in front of the bus. There wouldn't have been many consequences for Citra because she didn't kill the girl. It's not like there was long-term effects of
No.
it,
I will say
even
though
if somebody's seen her.
the name Thunderhead is a bit ominous, which I think is
Yeah,
intense. Because I mean a
yeah,
thunderhead is indicating that there's a storm on the way.
yeah, which I like. Oh, I guess we should mention that neither of us intend to read the next two books.
No.
Now that we're talking about how we think that the next two books would keep going. Yeah, I don't have any interest in reading the next couple books. I did
No.
like Scythe to some extent, and I thought it was fine. It's just like you mentioned, I was never invested very deeply into the world. And
I
then the ending moves real fast.
yeah. I think it's funny because the world building is actually really good. Like it feels like a thing that could happen and could exist. That's why we're talking about it that way. Like, oh yeah, it makes sense that the society would kind of work like this if this is how things played
Mhm.
out. But
Yeah.
that doesn't make us care.
Yeah. No, you're yeah, accurate.
So
It's just kind of like vaguely interesting. I don't find it so interesting. I
the
mean, we've
stakes,
read the Red Rising trilogy, and that's sort of like a futuristic sort of take, sort of dystopian, I suppose.
yeah.
And I could see everything like working together. And that one's like really big and complicated.
Mhm.
But that one, I don't know. I felt way more invested in that society than I am in this one. And this one's
Well,
closer to what my society might look like. Maybe
well,
that's why.
I think part of the problem is literally that death is conquered and that removes most stakes. I mean, yes, the main characters are in charge of death, but that almost makes the stakes even lower because it's like you know when someone's going to die.
You
I
cut out a little bit. Can you repeat the whole sentence that you just said?
yeah, I think that removing death from the equation does cut out the stakes. I think they tried really hard to get around that. The author like attempted to make stakes by setting up at the very beginning that Faraday took two Scythe apprentices, and so the Scythe Council decided that they would have to kill each other. Um, or not kill each other, but one of them would have to kill the other, depending on which one actually becomes a Scythe. And
Yeah.
that was a way of them trying to put stakes in the book, but it just. I didn't ever really believe that either of them would die, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of weird because like that moment you're like, "Oh, okay, so I guess one of them is going to." And you're right, I never believed it either. I never once believed that either of them would die at the end of this book. Never. I
Yep.
never even considered it in my mind that they would die. And it's
And I
weird
think
because some of the deaths in this book, I guess I just thought of this, so I want to say it real quick and we'll come back to whether we thought they were going to die or not. But some of the deaths in this book are really like jarring and some are just not. Anytime somebody is gleaned, I didn't find it as jarring. But
mhm.
there's this one lady who presents to the Scythe Council and she presents a thing where if you take a pill, then your touch is deadly, like it just instantly kills people for like the next hour. So a Scythe comes up and takes one of the pills and then he immediately gleans the lady.
Yep.
who was doing the presentation. And I think that was probably the most jarring death in this entire book. And it's
Agreed.
like literally almost a footnote.
Mm-hmm.
But
And they go building on
that's
the
the one I
plot.
remember.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Because we're in the heads of the people who are planning these deaths, it can't come as that much of a surprise.
Yeah. But when it
Um,
just happens like that, when it's just all of a sudden, you're just like, oh. Like, that's almost malicious, what he did. And
yep.
technically, Scythes are supposed to be without malice.
I don't think it is malicious though. It's the only way to prove that it worked, right?
I
Like,
suppose.
I guess that she probably had some sort of proof that it was working in like lab settings or something, but the only real way to know it would work is to kill a person. So,
I guess.
um, as far as the two of them not believing that either of them would die, I don't know if it's partly because I'm so jaded from YA novels doing this. Like, famously, the Hunger Games, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's gonna be Peeta or Katniss. They're both in the arena. They have to kill each other. Like,
Yeah.
and that was surprising when it happened.
But now they do it all
But
the time.
it's been done, yeah, and now people do it quite a bit. So,
Yeah. It's because they expect you to really like both of the characters, and then they're
yeah,
like, we can't kill them both. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like that would have been really interesting and surprising if they really went through with it.
yeah, and I'm not sure I liked either of the characters that much.
No, I don't think I was invested in either of them that much. One of the problems is that they're both just so nice.
Yep,
They're
both.
just really nice people. And that's why Faraday chose them, was because they're so darn nice.
Yeah,
They don't want to kill people. And you're like, okay, I don't know exactly why they dislike death so much. Is they talk about statistically that your chance of getting gleaned is like really, really small. And
mhm,
I guess maybe our perception of that is wrong throughout the book
mhm,
because it seems like it's not that small.
yeah,
I mean, Goddard goes on more than one mass killing spree
yep.
within like a couple of months of each other.
I think that's hard
So,
because of the perspective of the book again, though. Like,
yeah,
if you're following the killers, you're gonna see all of the deaths, not all the people
yeah,
having their ordinary lives.
yeah. So I don't know. It was kind of hard to gauge how true that was.
Mhm. Where were you going with this?
I don't remember. I can't remember what you said.
Me neither. I was just like, what were we talking about there?
I don't
Oh,
remember, Charlotte. I can't remember anything. Short-term
well,
memory's gone.
yeah. I just think. Oh, we were talking about whether we liked the characters.
Oh yeah, and how like I don't know. I
Citra's.
don't know why they were so upset about people dying because there's statistically they would never have even seen anybody die. But then I don't know. It's just kind of like weird. I guess I just didn't really care that they were like morally they had the moral high ground all the
Mhm.
time. And it
Yeah,
was to the point where I was like, are these characters like too benevolent? Are
maybe.
they like too good? Because Rowan is put into situations where he has to make more difficult decisions, but
Mhm.
he almost always makes the better decision anyway.
Yeah.
You know, they're very. I like some of the situations and how they figure out a way out of them because I think that it is really clever at a
Yeah.
lot of points. But
Yeah.
at
It's a
the same
clever.
time, I don't necessarily like the characters that much. They were just so sterilized.
Yep. I think the whole world is like that. Nothing felt like it was allowed to happen organically. So I think I enjoyed Citra more. I liked her secret about pushing the girl in front of the bus because that felt kind of real.
Hmm.
And I also liked there's a part in the book where she's trying to like sneak across the continent. Um, and she manages to get into this other country and there's like this interesting moment where she's kind of undercover and um, there could have been consequences, but there aren't. But
Yeah. Well, the end of the book, which I need to talk about the end of the book because the end moves at breakneck speed.
mhm.
Her going
Yeah.
across the continent is like such a short period of time in the book's world It
Yeah.
is like wild how quickly it moves. You go from Citra is accused of a crime she didn't commit,
Mhm.
and we know she didn't commit it. And
Yep.
then so she flees the country. She makes it to a safe place, and then her mentor, Scythe Curie, is like, "Well, I'll go try to fix it with the Scythedom,"
Mhm.
and then she just does.
And that all happens just like off camera per se.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just we're just like, oh, okay, and so it's just like you basically just skip a couple weeks while Citra's hiding out, and then there's like, and then Scythe Curie fixed it, and then she flies back, and everything's fine, and I was like,
Yeah.
what the heck?
So we never get to like sit with the emotions of Citra being a literal fugitive, other than that one scene that I'm talking about, which I did like, and I was like, I
Yeah,
would have liked more of this.
yeah, it was interesting. I was like, oh, is this going to become a cross country like spy novel now? Like
Hmm.
she's running from the law? Like that was
No.
really interesting. But no, it just kind of it just happens. And then everything with Rowan happens super fast too.
Hmm.
It just all happens in the last third of the book. Probably a novel's worth of things happen.
Yep.
But it just all happens so fast. And there's like
Yeah.
very few consequences. Everything is sort of like wrapped up into a neat little bow per se. And
Yeah.
you're just like,
So
okay.
instead of feeling like there was a payoff to the book, it just kind of felt like you predicted things that were going to happen. Corrie literally predicted what was going to happen, um, and texted me about it as she was reading the chapter, and I was like, "Oh, she's right."
Well, it's
But
funny because I've been thinking about that twist for like a while,
mhm,
probably for a good third of the book, and then I was getting closer to the end, and I was like, I should probably just say this out loud,
mhm,
just because I'm like, I've been feeling it in the back of my head for a long time.
yeah,
Um, and then it happened, and I was like, oh, there it is on the next page, like after I texted Charlotte about it.
yep,
It's just immediate.
yeah. So it didn't manage to be that surprising of a book.
No, it was all very like, oh, that's what happens next kind of thing, where you're not really surprised. Some of
Mhm.
the ways they get out of situations were very clever and a
Yeah,
little surprising, but those were just moments. Nothing about the plot is particularly surprising.
yeah.
Although I don't know how much plot there actually is in this book.
I mean, the plot is two Scythe apprentices survive being an apprentice.
Yeah, which is not even that unusual for the world.
No.
They don't kill
Well,
apprentices
it
if
did
they don't
seem
make
like
them.
roughly half of them flunked though,
Yeah,
or more.
yeah,
Which the final test, by the way, I have seen done before in so many like spy movies.
yeah,
So it was kind of it. I didn't actually call it, but I kind of was like, I feel like you need proof that you can go through with killing. So
yeah. Yeah, I definitely didn't call the final test either, but I was at the same time I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense."
hmm
And
that you know what that sentence that you said just there that sums up the book. Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense.
oh good. Yeah, you know what? Kind of right.
That's it. That's the whole vibe of the book.
I guess that makes sense.
Also, why didn't we see anyone get killed with a scythe, or did we and I just forgot?
Uh no, we did not.
I kind of
Nobody
wanted that to
actually
happen. I mean that's a bit gruesome, but wait, how did Curie kill that one guy on the street?
with just a knife.
Oh yeah, you're right. It was just a knife.
Yeah.
See, that could have been the moment. Or did you not want that to happen?
I mean, I don't really care either way. They
Hmm.
kill a lot of people,
Yeah, just
but
not with an actual scythe.
yeah, they never really mention one. Even with Rowan when he's following around Goddard, who's like murdering people at an alarming rate.
Hmm.
Goddard is so weird as a character. I just want to say because he seems really smart, but he's also just an idiot.
Yep.
He's a Scythe who's part of like the new Scythe order. The whole order of the Scythedom is sort of split between the old guard. Is that what they call them? The
Yeah.
old, okay, and then like the new. I can't remember what they call the new ones, but it's not like the old and the young. It kind of is, but it's people with an old idea of what sides being a scythe means, and people with a new idea. And the new idea is that they are celebrities and they like murdering people instead of the old guard way, which is that it's very sacred. It's very like you need to be ethical and you need to be compassionate and you need to be kind about killing people. You shouldn't just go run rampant. And the new order is like, no, let's just do mass killings or like let's enjoy killing people and stuff like that. Goddard is part of the new one, but we read a few of his diary entries, and he's like, there shouldn't be a quota. We should be able to kill whoever we want and however many we want. And I was like, are you an idiot? Because you sound like one when you say that.
Yeah.
Because if there's no quota and there's nothing to stop you, then you would just murder the whole world, and then it'd just be you.
There'd be no one left. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what would be the actual point? Like, it would take you a little while, but
yeah, there was no logic in his thoughts.
Yeah, there was zero logic.
He was somehow very savvy.
Yeah. So he wasn't stupid, but his ideas, and I don't know, maybe that's, I never really took him seriously as like a threat at all. Mostly because of that. Because he had no real like end goal. He was just like, I just want to murder people. And I'm like, is that it? Like, you literally do that all the time.
Yeah, you're allowed to do
slower.
That. It's in fact your job.
Yeah, it is in fact your job. You get everything handed to you on a silver platter. He can kill 5 people a week.
Mm-hmm.
That's the quota. But he waits and he doesn't. You can either kill, one person every day for however many days and then not have to kill anybody else, or you can just wait, and he waits until like the end of like the quarter of the year, I guess is how they really like sort of split it up. And then he goes and murders like 200 people in a day.
Yep.
And I'm like, you could just kill people throughout the year instead of doing that. But he doesn't. And I don't know. It's just weird. He has no logic behind what he actually wants to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if he had been like, if there wasn't a quota, then everybody would always be falling at my feet because there's always the possibility that I will literally just kill them. Because there's nothing holding me back. Whereas with a quota, if you really followed a scythe closely and utilized the Thunderhead and you knew the quota, you could figure out whether a scythe was going to kill you or not.
Yeah.
Because you would know if they reached their quota or not. And if they had for the quarter, then you would not have to be afraid of them.
True. Although it does seem like for most other sides who just, glean at a normal pace, it would be hard to tell.
Yes. Yeah. But with Goddard, because of the way he does it,
mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't like him because I wasn't supposed to. But I also just didn't view him as a threat at all.
No.
He just wasn't. He was so cartoon. He was such a cartoon villain.
Yes, I kind of wanted to see him fight Rowan, which didn't happen.
No.
And I was a little sad about that because I was like, is he actually that good of a killer? It seems like Rowan got real good.
Yeah.
But we only ever see, gleaning is basically, people don't put up a fight normally. So
no.
It's just kind of like...
Yeah, and if they do, there's consequences.
Yeah, their entire family gets gleaned if you fight.
Yeah.
So that's pretty prohibitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just hard to know if he was actually even good at what he did or not. I guess the fact that Rowan gets really good at killing probably implies that he was good, but it wasn't a ton of like one-on-one training. It was mostly just him telling Rowan to do stuff.
Yeah. It wasn't... We never really saw what Scythe Goddard could do.
No.
There was in his wake.
Really early on in the airplane, but even then, yeah, it's kind of skips the gore. I think because the author is probably cognizant of not wanting to glorify these kind of deaths.
Yeah.
So...
Well, that, and if you got too graphic, this wouldn't be a YA book anymore.
True.
There's a limit.
Yeah. There is a limit somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else to talk about? I thought we had talked about this book a lot longer. It doesn't feel like we talked about it that long. The thing is that not a ton happens until the last third of the book, and then even then, it just kind of wraps up a lot of stuff. It's not like
Yeah.
we're not left on the edge of our seat at the end of the book. Maybe other people are because of the way it ends, but I was not. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that's where it's going. Bye.
I did think it was kind of funny that there was a will they or won't they like relationship between Rowan and Citra.
Yeah, and you know what? By the end, I just didn't believe it anymore.
No, I was like, I don't feel any actual chemistry between them, so
No, and it was kind of annoying because they get split up.
yeah.
Like they spend like 3 or 4 months together, and then they get split up for the whole rest of the year because you're a Scythe's apprentice for a year. But
Hmm.
they're together for the first 3 or 4 months, and then they're split up, and they don't see each other except for like 3 days of the year at the Scythe like conferences. I can't remember what it's called, but I'm just gonna call it a conference.
No convention, isn't it?
Is it actually called a convention?
I think it is.
Okay, at the Scythe convention, where they talk about death and stuff. They only see each other for a couple of days then. And so there's 4 of those in a year. So they're together until basically the first one. And then
Mm,
they're split up and they see each other at the second one. And then do they see each other at the third one?
yeah.
Okay. But at both the second and the third one, Citra is told by her mentor, they're like, you shouldn't trust Rowan now
Hmm.
because of everything that's been going on. You shouldn't, like, you can't trust anything he says. But for some reason, Citra still kind of does. And, like, it's warranted because we're in both of their heads, so we know that they're both still, like, good people regardless. But
Exactly.
then by the third one, she's kind of, like, not really trusting him at all. But it's just kind of weird. There's no reason for them to like each other.
No, and they don't even try to contact each other outside of those meetings, which is kind of, I don't know if they just feel like they couldn't. It seems like they definitely could though.
Yeah, I feel like they could. I don't remember any time it being like the apprentices are not allowed to talk to each other.
No, so it's like it just feels like, well, they must not be that invested in this relationship if they're not even trying to reach out to each other outside of these conventions.
Yeah. But then by the fourth one, they're just like they're essentially doing all of their actions for the love of the other person.
Yeah, but I feel like I don't know. To me it just felt more like a friendship. I mean, like if me and you were in this situation, I wouldn't want to kill you either.
Oh. But it's just like they didn't know each other before this. And then they meet up, they spend a couple months together in which they do not confess any feelings to each other, but
Yep.
they're like, yeah, I guess, I like them
Hmm.
and they're pretty cute, so, that's cool. And then they're apart for like 9 months. And then when they get back together again, they're still like, oh, I love you. And I'm
Hmm.
just like, do you though? Like, do you really? Because I don't feel it.
Yeah.
And I kind of hate the whole back and forth of it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, are they gonna have a relationship? Are they not? And I'm like, I literally don't even care. I don't even know why you guys are so conflicted about this.
Nope. Other than Scythes aren't supposed to have relationships with each other.
Yeah, so maybe it's the whole forbidden aspect of it. Where they're like, oh, it's forbidden, so they're more attracted to each other.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I didn't really get a good vibe from it.
No, and I also think it's funny that Citral had like no friends.
Yeah,
In spite of being like fairly nice as far as we can tell and like a
yeah,
decent person, she really has no friends that she ever contacts in the book. At least Rowan had like one friend.
yeah. Yeah, that is kind of weird. Because she seemed like she would have been fairly popular. Because it talks about she tried, like, different things all the time. They're both very driven in their studies.
Mm-hmm.
Which Rowan is first portrayed as not being driven in his studies. And I'm just like, but he seems really driven. They're both also very competitive.
Yeah.
But they always want the other person to win. Which is just another part of the weird romance that was irritating more
Yeah.
than endearing.
Especially because I wanted to see what they could do.
Yeah, but they were always holding back.
Yep. So it just becomes frustrating after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, if
Any
you were a
other?
Scythe, Corrie,
Oh, I was about to say any weird questions for me, Charlotte,
how
because
did
you're always
you
the one who
know?
comes up with weird questions.
That's my job on this podcast.
It really is.
Uh, how would you glean?
I feel like I'd probably be likely to do it the way Faraday does it.
Yeah.
where it's like, well, statistically, this person died because that's the kind of person I am now.
Mm.
So I would be like, oh, well, this seems most likely. So I'd probably do something like that.
Yeah.
What about you, Charlotte? How would you glean?
I mean, if we're going off of who I am now, I feel like I would travel a lot to glean.
Yeah.
That was something else that didn't seem to happen that much, or at least they left out of the book. Although they do mention at one point that you can't glean too much in like your own neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, they also mention that one touristy place
Yeah.
that apparently, like, there's an entire country that has a poor relationship with the size of um, basically America
Mhm.
because the American sides go on vacation there and then they glean to keep up with
Mhm.
their quota. And
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of a funny thing, but it's
Yeah.
literally like it's an actual plot point.
Yeah, it is. But so I just think if that was allowed, like I don't know, I would enjoy traveling around and
Yeah.
I don't this isn't really a decision I guess I'm making about who I would glean, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I like the statistic method. I feel like I might not be able to commit to it though. So,
Yeah, I could probably commit to it though.
you would.
Yeah, I could probably do that. I don't think that I would feel like it was right any other way.
I mean, I wouldn't want to have
I don't think I could like vary from that too much cuz I feel like I don't
and
know. I
it
mean, I
just becomes
wouldn't want to be a
arbitrary.
side anyway because I
Well,
don't that's my
that's
job.
that's the first sign that you're supposed to be a scythe, remember?
No, it depends on which side you talk to, remember?
Well, okay.
That's the way Faraday chose his apprentices, but then other sides choose their apprentices different ways.
But I feel like we're supposed to support the old guard and their way of having some kind of morality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard decision. I feel like it's interesting because they have to learn so many ways to kill people, and I feel like
Yeah.
I would err towards the more bloodless ways, but
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it would just kind of depend. I would definitely err towards the fast ways,
yeah.
like ways that don't make people suffer,
Hmm.
because that seems unnecessarily cruel to make
Yeah.
people suffer. But other than that, I don't know. Because sometimes bleeding out is less suffering than maybe a more bloodless way.
True. The instant touch death is kind of cool.
Yeah, that was actually kind of cool.
And it doesn't seem like they monitor that at all, like the way you kill people, other than the whole not killing people with fire thing.
Yeah, which wasn't
Corruptions and things.
actually. Yeah, there were a few things that they were like, you can't kill people with explosive projectiles.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, just the fact that you have to like outlaw that tells me how far down the side thumb has gone down the rabbit hole
Yep.
of corruption,
Yep.
which was another thing that this book talked a lot about. It was like, oh, the corruption of people, and I was like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess if you already believe that people can be easily corrupted or relatively easily corrupted over time, no matter who they are, then this book does not pose very many moral questions for you.
Nope.
Because it was like, oh, well, what would you do as a scythe? And I'm like, well, I probably wouldn't have voted for a scythedom.
Yep. I do feel like it was interesting at the very end he alludes to or talks about the purge where they killed a bunch of people who were
Yes.
still from the mortal era.
Yeah, I did like that that did come up
But then
eventually.
I was almost like it seems like it would be more interesting if that this book was set then.
Yeah, it would. It would have been a lot more interesting to see because if you were born in the mortal age, you would have had a much higher, not survival, what is it?
Chance of
You
dying? I don't know.
well, you wouldn't have wanted to die. Obviously.
Yes.
Obviously no one wants to, but there's a word for it. Survival instinct, I guess.
Yeah.
And I feel like they would have fought against that a lot more. And by the time the Scythe decided that that was unethical
Mm-hmm.
to basically cull everybody from the mortal age, but by the time they decided that, it was already basically too late.
Yeah, they'd killed most of them.
Yeah. So that was an interesting moral dilemma. I did like that being brought up, but then I immediately thought, didn't they do this in X-Men already?
Genocide of, yeah.
Well, isn't that what Magneto wants?
Yeah,
To some extent,
basically. He
the
either wants to,
extinction.
yeah, either destroy humanity or convert them into mutants, one or the other.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I don't feel like everything in this book has been done before, but I feel like the concepts have kind of been done before. I think the most interesting part of it was the benevolent AI,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know that I've ever seen that anywhere else. Not like truly benevolent AI. It's always, oh, the AI is acting benevolent, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really sinister, and you get those vibes from the beginning. I do not get the vibes that the Thunderhead will go off the rails. Maybe it does by the end of the third book, but
Maybe.
I'm not sure about that.
No, to me, it felt more like the Thunderhead does have a plan, but I don't think it's necessarily a negative plan. I think it's just something important that it's going to do in the future books.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like if there was a prequel to this book, I might be interested in reading it. Like,
Yeah,
if you
it would be
followed
kind of,
Madame Curie as a young Scythe.
yeah, because she's been around for a while. That's also really interesting that their scythes are allowed to self glean
Mm-hmm.
when they're done, and pretty much all the sides from the beginning have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting because immortality has not been around for that long. It's only been around for a couple hundred years, which is a while, but it's not like so long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to live for a couple hundred years, like yeah, that's twice as long as most, as even the oldest people live to what? Like maybe 110? Living
Yeah.
to 100 is noteworthy in our day and age. So living twice as long is really cool, but it's still, like, it's still only twice as long. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like that wild to
Yeah.
me. But I think it's interesting how it is still that new. And so the sidestem is still that new, but everybody who started the sidestem is gone.
Yeah. There are.
And and people are already like, there are already people who are like tired of living so long. And it's just kind of interesting to me that it feels like a very short timeline for that. Like usually in books that have people living for a long time, it's like there's like a vampire that's lived for like 2000 years and he's like, I grow weary of this mortal world. And you're like, okay, I guess I get that since you're like 2000 years old. But it's never like a 150-year-old who's like, I'm so sick of being alive.
Yeah. Yeah, which does seem a bit early.
They also don't know as much about immortality as I think I initially got the impression of.
As far as like how many times they could turn the corner and stuff, or what?
Yeah, because they really don't know. Like they say, like, oh, we've conquered death and all of this, and it's like, yeah, but you don't actually know the very long-term effects of immortality. Like you just can't know that. I mean, you have nanites that heal everything, sure, and you can basically stay young, but people still age. Like they still naturally age
Yeah.
and progress. They're just in significantly better health. So it's funny because even though you can continue to live on, most people still turn the corner when they get close to 100 or like close to like a natural death age,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
interesting. I think there's a lot of interesting things about the world. There's more world building in this than there is plot.
That's
I think,
basically what the book is. It's a lot of world building.
yeah, the plot is mostly active in the last third of it, and at that point, it all is, like I said, just so fast.
And it is well written and well thought out.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it's an enjoyable read.
yeah, I definitely never dreaded picking it up or
Mm-mm.
anything like that. I definitely enjoyed reading it. It does feel slow at the beginning. I was reading a few reviews, and that is kind of the biggest complaint among people, is that it does feel slow.
Yeah.
But I didn't
It
feel
picks
like
up.
it was so slow. Felt like I was
No.
fine with it.
It was still interesting. It never got actually boring.
Yeah. Well, I would recommend this book if you're listening to this and you would still like to read it. We actually didn't spoil many of the big things that I thought that we might. So
Yeah.
there's still lots for you to enjoy in here, and it is an enjoyable read. And I think most people who read this, it does have pretty high reviews. And I feel like most people who read this will probably go on to continue the series. I think you and I just, I don't know if we tend to not continue series or not, because we have finished a
We've done,
couple.
yeah, we've done both. I,
Have we done one more than the other? Because we read, before we started this podcast, we read Red Rising, which is a trilogy, and we read the Half Bad trilogy. But we didn't continue Ruin of Kings, and we aren't continuing Scythe. What else have we read that would have been the start of a series? Have we read any other beginnings?
well, technically you said Willow of Wildwood, but that wasn't an active choice.
Yeah, it didn't have a second book when we read that one. Yeah, Along the Indigo doesn't. I guess we didn't keep going with The Tourist. That technically has more books.
Oh, yeah. That's
We
like
decided
a
not to
long
keep
series,
going.
though.
Yeah, and The Golem and the Genie also had another book.
So I guess we have a history of not reading series.
Yes, we'll read the first book. But I mean, that's always kind of been my policy anyway.
Yeah. I
Is
have to
that
really
I
love something to keep reading.
Yeah, and I'm not a completionist. I don't have to finish things all the
Hmm.
time. So, yeah, I guess we do kind of have more of a history of not doing series than anything else. But I mean, we've completed 2 trilogies.
Yeah.
It's still a good number. I
So you can
mean,
still impress us enough into reading your trilogy.
yeah, or just
Longer
interest
series
us
would be
enough.
hard
Yeah, I
because it's too
don't.
many months.
Yeah, I try not to pick anything that is more than a trilogy
Yeah.
if I do pick things. Because I think once you get past that, it is way more difficult. I think if either of us picked a book that started a series that was more than a trilogy, I think at the end of that it would be a you're really on your own. We're not going to read the rest together per
Yeah.
se. Cuz
Yeah.
that's too much. It's too much of a commitment. Because the thing about it is because we go every other month, if we read the first book in a trilogy, then the other person actually has to give up one of their picks for the year
Hmm.
in order for us to finish the trilogy. So you're asking a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't expect that of Charlotte for every single trilogy, and she doesn't
Yeah.
expect it of me either.
Nope.
So that's where we are as far as whether we finish series and trilogies or not. Trilogies more likely. We've never picked up. Wait, well, Rune of Kings is technically going to be 5 books. There's 3 out right now, and I think The Tourist was 4.
Yeah.
So I guess we have picked up the books before, but I don't know if we knew. I knew about the Ruin of Kings one, but I
I didn't
didn't.
know about the tourist.
Yeah, we didn't know about the Tourist when we first started. And I think with Ruin of Kings, I think I said at the beginning that I didn't expect us to read the whole series,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
wasn't any good anyway. So go listen to that podcast. We didn't even like that book. We liked it okay, but it wasn't great enough for us to keep going.
It was worse than Scythe.
Yeah, it was more complicated than Scythe. I
Mm.
bet Scythe is such a simple concept, and it's a simply executed novel. I
Yep.
think that's what makes it easy. I would find it very easy to recommend this book to people. But if they ask me whether I liked it or not, I think I'd have a hard time answering.
Yeah. No.
All right, that was our take on Scythe by Neal Shusterman. We are starting our next book, which is actually going to be nonfiction.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting because it'll be our first nonfiction book on this podcast. We really only pick 1 or 2 nonfiction books a year. They're
Yeah.
just a little more dense. They take a little longer to get through.
So the next one's my pick, and it's The Story of English. So
3rd revised edition.
yeah, specifically. I think it's actually a book that's often used in college courses or high school courses or something, but
Yeah, it very much looks like a textbook.
I'm
That's
hoping
fun.
it'll still be fun and interesting.
Yeah. So if you want to read along, if you read along with us for Scythe, let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
And if you're going to read along with us for the Story of English, let us know that too.
Mm-hmm.
The Story of English is by Robert McCrum, Robert McNeil, and William Cran. If you want to look it up, I feel like it wouldn't be that hard to find.
No.
But that is the one that we'll read for next month. And this has been Scythe. So yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments, whether you've read Scythe and you agree with us, or whether you read Scythe and you disagree with something that we said here. I mean, I would love to continue discussions in the comments, honestly, because I
Yeah.
think that's fun. As long as we can all be civil about it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Charlotte and I didn't hate the book or anything. It's not like we're raging about it or anything. But
Nope.
yeah, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next month. Bye.
Bye.